I'm really happy to be here. I've been on a book tour with my book, The Kurds, a People in Search of Their Homeland, and talking about my experiences with strangers. I know so many of you in the audience. I'm very happy that you're here. It's nice to be home. I want to thank Roman. I want to thank the Arts and Lectures series and UCSB. I'm thinking, and was so thinking on the way out here, about how many times I had been back and forth from Santa Barbara to Iraq. And the number I came up with was 18 or 19 since 1991. I thought perhaps I should get a place on an honorary place at least on the board of directors of Santa Barbara Airbus, because I had come back and forth to LAX so many times. I've been privileged during that 15 years to see this great change among the Kurds. Frankly, in 1991, I didn't know who the Kurds were. And when I first went there at the end of the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, 1.5 million refugees were driven to the mountains after the rather generous terms of surrender where General Schwarzkopf gave Saddam back his Soviet-made gunships. And these gunships were used, these helicopters, to chase the Kurds to the mountains of Iran and Iraq. And in fact, it was one of the largest migrations of people, of refugees in the 20th century. Some 1.5 million refugees were driven, 1 million to Iran and about 500,000 to Turkey. And I had an Irish passport, and I was able to get into Iran where the majority of the refugees were. And that began this long journey to these various Kurdistans, the Kurdistan of Iran, the Kurdistan of Syria, the Kurdistan of Iraq, and the Kurdistan of Turkey. And during that time, I found that the Kurds were changing, and where I had seen them and met them first in tents in the mountains, that was the first Kurdish home I slept in. In the 15 years, after 15 years, in 2005 and 2006, the Kurds are right in the middle of the corridor of power in the green zone. There's a Kurd who's president of Iraq, an unimaginable prospect a few years back, and a Kurd is the foreign minister, the deputy prime minister, and they have other very important portfolios. So I have seen this arc from these refugees in the tents to the presidential palace where Saddam once gave out orders that included the gassing of the Kurds. So what I'd like to do here today is to take you back a little bit on that run, on that arc that I saw, that big change in the Kurds. And I'll begin first by showing you some pictures of the current situation. I say current, I'm saying that the U.S. invasion, which began in 2003. And certainly we all thought this was going to be an easy operation. We were told that it would be fast and quick, and our troops would be welcomed with chocolates and flowers in the streets. And so as they raced from one city to another, it looked like a very easy job. The Ba'athist seemed to give way, to melt into the crowds, putting their civilian clothes back on. And it all seemed as if it was just as it had been planned. Soon, however, and all too soon, we learned that it wasn't quite as we had imagined it. And arguments began to develop. It was 120 degrees Fahrenheit, and the electricity wouldn't work. And there were many other things that began to happen that were terrible surprises for the soldiers who went there. I know when I was embedded, the soldiers would tell me, we weren't tipped off to this by our commanders in the staging area in Germany. And frankly, we're surprised the people here are not greeting us as liberators. So with those introductory pictures, I'd like then to take you back to 1991 and back to my introduction, and then we'll march forward back to the time of the war again. When I first met the Kurds, I knew so little about them that I had I talked to one person who was the only Kurd in Santa Barbara, and I recall his telling me a tremendous amount of information on the eve of my leaving to go to Iran. And my head was swimming with this information about the Turks and the Kurds and the Iranians and Saddam and Syrian this and Turkish this and speaking this language and that. And finally, at the end of it, I said, well, I think I've got it straight now. So you people, I said to this lone Kurdish resident of Santa Barbara, I said, so you people, your language, it's not Turkish, it's Turdish. And he has kidded me about that over the years. And I guess the point of what I'm saying is, when I started, I knew very little about the Kurds. And then I met them back in 1991 in several of these countries, first in Iran, then in Turkey, and then in Iraq. So this is where I began, in the mountains of Iran in 1991. At this time, there were people were sick with typhoid and cholera. Sometimes the numbers were estimated at 1,000 per day who were dying from either gunshots in running away, being blown up by mines, or diseases like cholera and typhoid. I remember this photograph because when you're a photojournalist and you are in the midst of tragedy and the people are strangers, you feel very much like an intruder. And indeed, I felt like an intruder coming here when this man's small daughter was, died having stepped on a landmine, a small toddler. And as I came into the scene and picked up my camera, I could feel myself trembling because I felt in many ways I shouldn't be there. And when I saw him wrap her in a blanket and then place her in the rocky ground, he came across to me and he put his arms around me, a complete stranger, and I could feel that he was trembling more than I was. And he said, "This is a great honor for me, a great honor for my daughter that you have come to her funeral." One of the most difficult parts of this Rökerdin, that's the Kurdish word for running away, the going to the mountains, was that as soon as a person got off the pavement or got off a dirt road, some of the kids would go off to relieve themselves, some of the adults, and there were landmines that were sown from the great war between Iraq and Iran during the 1980s, this 8-year war that took the lives of 2 million soldiers. So with these pictures coming back to the West, both Britain and the United States decided to set up a safety zone for the Kurds in northern Iraq, patrolled by American, British, French, and Turkish jets as an allied protected area for the Kurds in the north of Iraq. They drew a line on the 36th parallel, and these planes, this is an F-15 in Turkey, would make daily patrols into this area to make sure that Saddam Hussein's aircraft didn't violate this area. Now that was a big change in the lives of the Kurds. For almost a century, since the end of the Ottoman Empire, they had been trying to find a homeland and bring it together. And here, for the first time, they had this self-government, this autonomous zone in the north. These were some of the early mercy flights, a Chinook helicopter bringing in food for people in the mountains. But you know, the Kurds, and I write this in my book begins in Santa Barbara at the time I came back from the war for the first time in 2003 after being there for about 7 months. And I begin it in the Fiesta Parade, and it begins with a Kurdish adage, an old proverb, which says, "Someone who's been bitten by a snake will always be afraid of rope." And indeed, the Kurds had been bitten many times by the same snake, the West, and had many reasons with all these broken promises to feel that it could happen again. I take you to this video frame of Donald Rumsfeld and Saddam Hussein in 1983. Donald Rumsfeld was a special envoy of President Reagan, and he came to Baghdad in 2 different trips in late 2003 and early 2004. And this was the time when Iraq was considered a pariah. It was an international outlaw, and Saddam was known as the Butcher of Baghdad. And indeed, it was felt at that time that one of the architects of the Black September massacre at the Munich Olympics was being given sanctuary by Saddam. And so Iraq was on the list of terror states. And what the Reagan administration did was to remove him from that list and then gradually to rehabilitate him. And then the weapons companies, much of them incidentally centered in Southern California, began sending huge amounts of arms over to the Iraqi regime. It began here really with this meeting, and some of the weapons were later used against the Kurds. Now this is 1988. You can imagine my surprise when I heard that a few weeks after 9/11, Kurds had been called in to the office of the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld, and told that the U.S. was contemplating a regime change and that their forces in northern Iraq would be used for this. And one of the justifications for this regime change, in fact a central justification, was the fact that 13 years earlier the Kurds had been gassed. The problem, though, came in this is the town of Halabja, a city of about 80,000 near the Iranian border. And it was here on the 16th of March in 1988 that 5,000 Kurdish civilians were killed by chemical bombs, a cocktail of potions, some of it sarin gas, some of it mustard gas. People died horrible deaths and different deaths. Some of them died bleeding from their ears, some of them died laughing, some of them died vomiting. Horrible deaths. And the terrible thing about it is that much of it had been done with the aiding and abetting of the West. U.S. helicopters had been converted for use, and certain spray nozzles had been put on them, and the gas was sprayed out. Other aircraft from the West, the Bechtel Corporation, had helped to build a chemical plant near Baghdad, and it was precursor material that was used in these gas attacks. So this is in Halabja now. This is, I wonder if they could bring up the house lights just a little bit. I have the feeling that I'm the only one in the auditorium here. I can't see anyone, just a tad. So back to my learning experience when I began to learn that there had been a number of betrayals even before this, because after the gassing, the Kurds asked the West to isolate Saddam Hussein in 1988. There were trade sanctions that were introduced in the U.S. Senate in an effort to try to isolate Saddam. They were blocked by the Reagan-Bush administration. And then between 1988 and 1991, when the war in Kuwait began, billions more U.S. dollars in arms were transferred to Saddam. I write about this in my book, The Kurds, the People in Search of Their Homeland. And I write about the shipments of botulism from Fort Meade in Maryland, the shipments of anthrax, the shipments of germ warfare. And it was rather startling to find out how much we had aided this regime after this terrible gassing. This is the rubble in Halabja. Some of it's been cleaned up since then, but this was in 1991, 3 years after the gassing. In fact, the shipments of Western aid, American aid, including aid from Bechtel, Don Rumsfeld was also a special emissary of Bechdel. He had come there with two things in his meetings in the mid-'80s when this rehabilitation of the dictator began, this bringing him back in within the community of nations. He brought a handwritten letter from Ronald Reagan, and the second thing he brought was an offer from the Bechtel Corporation to build an oil pipeline across Iraq. So the Kurds remember this. This is not the only time they have been betrayed. The most famous time was in 1975 when the Nixon administration secretly channeled $12 million to start a Kurdish uprising against the Iraqi government, and then pulled the plug on this when Henry Kissinger made a deal secretly between Saddam and the Shah to transfer an Iraqi island to Iran. And then overnight, 300,000 refugees, 300,000 Kurds were forced to leave Iraq. Many of these people found their way, incidentally, to San Diego and to Fargo and to Nashville and to other cities where you'll find Kurdish populations today. But they remember. Then we get to 1991, after the Kurds have run to the mountains and are afraid to come back down again. And at that time, the first President Bush exhorted all of the Iraqis to rise up, including the Shiites and the Kurds and others. And everyone took this as a signal that the U.S. was on their side and would secretly help, but didn't, and the Kurds felt betrayed again. It happened in 1996 under the Clinton administration when there was a failed CIA overthrow attempt and thousands more Kurds had to leave the country. And it may be happening now, because even though the Kurds have this fragile experiment, this self-autonomous zone in the north, they're beginning to feel, and I was on the phone today to someone in Iraq, that things are starting to look bad again. There's been shelling from Iran, and the Turkish army now is poised on the border with 250,000 troops in the southeast part of Turkey, right on the Iraq border. So the Kurds are beginning to feel this pinch again. But in fact, there may be another job that we have for the Kurds. They may be needed for the new enterprise that's being considered in Iran. The Kurds have a long border with Iran, and it's thought that it might be used for a staging area if necessary. Secondly, the Kurds in Iran, according to sources, are being stirred up by special forces and CIA paramilitaries, and this would also be another use of the Kurds, but I digress here. So in 1991, when the Kurds finally began coming down from the mountains to this beautiful land, which really took my breath away, I had thought when I first went to Iraq that I was going to desert, and instead I really found that I had discovered a Switzerland-like place in the Middle East. A lovely place. Here is a typical traffic jam. I think the sheep outnumber the people in this country by something like 25 to 1. So it's very common to see this. In the beginning, in the first part of my experience in the early 90s, the Kurds were still suffering from having the water plants bombed by the Allies and having no electricity. This woman is gathering sticks for fuel, for cooking fuel and heating fuel. So, give you an idea of the different generations. So the Kurds found themselves under this Allied protection in this enviable position of running their own affairs for the first time. And they began to polish this experiment. By the time we get to the US-led invasion in 2003, they've had 12 years of running their own affairs. This is the President Masoud Barzani of the Kurdistan Regional Government in the north. This is a picture taken in the 90s. This is his brother, who was a friend of mine who was injured by F-14s in a friendly fire attack that killed a number of Kurds during the current war. And this is an old, I guess, sort of a junkyard tank that the Kurds have put together after liberating part of it from Saddam's forces. Oop, a little too fast there. So these women and this little girl are collecting dung and using it for fuel. This is a picture taken in Iran. Iran has many more Kurds. Turkey has many more Kurds than Iraq. There's something like 7 or 8 million in Iran and 14 or 15 million in Turkey. But by contrast, the Kurds that most of us know about in Iraq are something fewer than 5 million. This is Syria, where the Kurds have about 1 million people. The Kurdish areas in Syria, unlike the mountainous areas in the other 3 countries, are really quite flat. And people list that as one reason why there's never been a successful guerrilla operation. Kurds and other guerrillas like the mountains. And of course, the famous saying about the Kurds is they have no friends but the mountains. So now we're going to move a little bit north of the Iraq border, just a few miles away, and we're in Turkey, the place where the majority of this 25 to 30 million Kurds live. The Kurds there, seeing what was going on in Iraq, became naturally somewhat envious and wanted their rights, and both all 3 countries, Iran, Syria, and Turkey, began to see restive populations in their own area. These are Kurds protesting in Turkey. And this is the guerrilla group, the Kurdistan Workers' Party. And this group is going to come into the news in the next few weeks because Secretary of State Rice has just come, I think she was there in Ankara on the 27th or the 28th of last month, and she was here in part to talk about this group. The Kurdistan Workers' Party fought a 15-year uprising. They had some 6,000 or 7,000 guerrillas fighting from 1984 to 1999 when their leader was captured. They'd begun as a Marxist-Leninist-oriented group. By the time I met them in the early 90s, their demands had been considerably scaled down to cultural autonomy. Now, the reason that this group has come into prominence now is that Turkey has demanded of the United States, as a condition for getting on board for what may happen in Iran, and this was part of the reason for Secretary Rice's visit, Turkey has demanded the right to go into a cross-border operation, to go into the sovereign country of Iraq and to try to rout out these guerrillas who have sanctuary there. So this is possibly a large story that's looming very quickly. During this war in the 1990s, some 37,000 people were killed, and it was really a hidden war. We knew very little about it in this country. The New York Times did not even think it necessary to open a bureau in Turkey until 1996. At that point, 37,000 people were dead. Most of them were Kurds. There were 3,500 villages that were destroyed, and almost as many as in Saddam's time in Iraq, where some 4,000 Kurdish villages were destroyed. So an awful lot was going on. The Turkish army was U.S. equipped. Some of the weapons were made here in Santa Barbara, most of them in Southern California. Here on the other side is a woman who's been the beneficiary, if I could say that, of battlefield surgery, and she has a plastic hand with which she's holding up her Kalashnikov, what we call an AK-47. Another commander, 50 caliber Doshka, a Russian-made machine gun. And here is the founder of the Kurdistan Workers' Party, Apo Abdullah Öcalan. Apo means uncle, and he's affectionately known as Apo by those who follow him, and known not so affectionately as Apo by those who oppose him. This was a story that I worked on with 60 Minutes. This is a safe house where I and the crew Ed Bradley did the story, met Apo in the Bekaa Valley outside of Beirut. This is the leader who was captured in 1999. He's incarcerated in a specially built cell on an island near Istanbul. His sentence of death was commuted to life as part of the Turkish effort to be admitted to the EU. Something which is in process but which has not yet happened. What I found was kind of amazing about traveling with the guerrillas was the fact that we sometimes had very little food. Sometimes we were very much vegetarians, eating plants and whatever else we could find. They normally had sugar for tea, though, and they always had a mule that would carry the parts of a satellite dish. And I thought it was very interesting to be in such a remote area without internet, without electricity, without the ability to telephone. And yet we had a satellite dish that would be assembled each evening, taken off the mules and set up, and we would have instantaneous programming from Britain and Belgium. I remember sitting with armed guerrillas on a hillside and watching a live Clinton press conference and trying to explain to some of the fighters who Monica Lewinsky was. The Kurds in Iraq, incidentally, and I mentioned this in my book, were fascinated by Monica Lewinsky, and they call the large Mercedes-Benzes, the 500 series, the ones with the buxom fenders and so forth, they call those Monicas very affectionately. This is a shot taken in Turkey. It's a U.S. made tank, an M60. Incidentally, it's made by the Food Machinery Corporation up here in San Jose. And this is part of the area which was occupied by several 100,000 troops when I took this in the Kurdish area. These are some of the villages that were destroyed. The Kurdistan Workers' Party committed many acts of terror during this period of time, and the state of Turkey committed many acts of terror. Both have been fully documented by Amnesty International and by the U.S. State Department. But as always, the civilians were caught in the middle, and when I was traveling through these villages, some of them were still smoldering behind army lines. This is the famous Tigris River, really the cradle of civilization, and here Kurds with giant family-sized refrigerators and everything they've owned on donkeys, crossing the Tigris River, escaping a burnt village on the other side. Some of them had buried their valuables in this field you see in the distance, and they are now crossing and fleeing the army. This is a school, a Kurdish school in Turkey that was hit by a tank shell. This is a picture which is on the front of my book. A man was telling me about how his son had been killed by a death squad. He was a young Kurdish journalist, pro-Kurdish journalist in Turkey, and the man is holding the snapshot of him in his hands. And this is a woman whose husband was killed by a death squad also. She said they came and he was the village leader, and the Turkish army had threatened him that if the village did not accept weapons and fight the PKK, that he would be harmed. And he was pulled out of the house about midnight, she told me. She heard a gunshot. She was afraid to look and to go outside, and when the first light came, she went out and found him. She's putting cherries on his grave, much like American Indians, to feed his spirit. Now we're working our way back into Iraq from Turkey, and yet these people are Turkish Kurds, part of those who were refugees from these burnt villages and very much pro-guerrilla who came into northern Iraq, kind of a reverse of the 1991 refugees that I had seen going from Iraq to these other countries like Turkey and Iran. Here, Turkish Kurds are coming and taking sanctuary from the conflict in Iraq in this new autonomous zone. But as we'll see, this causes political trouble for this very fragile enclave in the north of Iraq. And soon the Turkish jets are looking for Turkish Kurds and looking for the PKK in their bombing. This was an Iraqi Kurdish village where several civilians, including a child apparently who had this cradle at one time, were killed. So this is a political problem now which presents itself for Masoud Barzani and the other Kurdish leaders, and they have to decide what to do about it in order to save their own enterprise, this fledgling democracy in the north of Iraq. And so it's not surprising that a civil war would develop under pressure from the U.S. and Turkey. And here is the classic case where Iraqi Kurds are fighting Turkish Kurds, where the picture is taken is in Iraq, and where this man is pointing to that mountain, that's in Turkey. So thousands of people were killed with Kurds fighting Kurds, a real fight within the family, sometimes brother against brother. Civil wars, of course, are the dirtiest and bitterest of all wars. This was a picture, it was in Newsweek of an Iraqi Kurd who had been shot by a Turkish Kurd. Back in those times, there was no internet, no electricity, and pretty much when you crossed into Iraq, you were leaving behind the rest of the 20th century. I was trying to use a radio to get, with a big antenna, to get a report 500 miles away to Damascus, where it would be picked up. I was doing a piece at that time for CBS. So lots of bad news early on, and yet at the same time the Kurdish economy, once the Kurds started running their own affairs, started to improve. Guerrillas, who are known in Kurdish as the Peshmerga, those who face death is the translation. The Peshmerga would now have time to get married and try to begin leading a normal life. The cities started to be rebuilt. There was a lot of Western aid that came primarily from Europe, and many NGOs and relief organizations and houses were built from the rubble. What was really remarkable, I began to see that there was a formation of a society taking place almost before my eyes in 93, 94, and 95. Ministries were opened of transportation and health, police departments. In fact, the Kurds began talking, and I thought this was really wild, about getting seatbelt laws and perhaps even having driver tests, which I thought was a very good idea, because I think one of the most serious dangers that a visitor was exposed to was not so much combat, but bad drivers on bad roads. So we're in a mosque now, a Kurdish mosque. The Kurds are primarily Sunni Muslims, but they're very secular, and they're very wary about what they call the danger of a theocratic state in Iraq. After they began running their own affairs, they became less and less interested in being involved either with the Shiites, who are very religious, or with the Sunnis, because it was the class of Sunnis that visited the genocide upon them. I remember this day because I was in the mosque, and this young boy forgot about praying for a moment, and we had this moment where we connected smiling, which I guess is a form of a prayer as well. So this was a man who had told me that he was my bodyguard for life, and I told him I would have difficulty getting his Kalashnikov back to California, but I would look into it. A wonderful guy that worked with me for a while during the war in 2003. So before the U.S.-led invasion, Iraqi money was still used in the north, and the Kurds were aware of the fact that Saddam represented a menace. He was not the menace that he was before, because the Allies were making it safe in the north, mostly safe. And yet there were instances like this where Iraqi agents had come and blown up a cafe, had paid some hungry Kurd to put some dynamite in a cafe. I had just come across this in a town just a couple of hours after 4 or 5 people, including this man's young son, were killed in that act of terrorism in the mid-90s. And according to Muslim tradition, a person must be buried before sundown, and so I was there at the time of the funeral for this man and his loss. So people, no matter what their age, continued to be armed. It's very much of an armed society. This was a case where my taxi driver, who's speaking there with his mother, the other 3 women are his sisters. 2 weeks after I left him in 1994, he was killed on the highway by common bandits. A very nice man. His name was Azad. So here are the 2 leaders for the two factions in the north. The Patriotic Union of Kurdistan on the left, the man in the tie now is the president of Iraq, Jalal Talabani, and the man on the right is Masoud Barzani. Now they are the ones who headed these 2 blocks, these 2 rival factions. And the news to report this very week in 2006 is that these 2 rival factions have unified their government. And I'll talk a little bit about why. Some of it was to outside pressure from Washington and others, and some of it was internal pressure because they realized in fighting each other in the north, they would not have a chance with a divided administration to secure oil-rich Kirkuk, which is the next chapter in what we're going to see in the Kurdish area, the fight over Kirkuk. So these are some of the Peshmerga, again, when these 2 blocks, the PUK and the KDP, fought each other. Now we're coming all the way forward to 2002. And the Kurds have made great strides throughout the 90s. Things are going their way, and suddenly they're called into the Pentagon and told that there's going to be a war. They're tipped off. Uncle Sam has a job for them, and they're very happy. The Kurds were very pro-war, and others who were their friends and colleagues may not have been pro-war, but it was easy to see after so much genocide had been visited upon them that they would take this chance and that they would try to ride on Uncle Sam's knee. Now I show you this picture because this was a group at the same time, after this pact was made between the Kurds and the Pentagon, that the Kurds would play a kind of northern alliance, using the parallel to Afghanistan, a kind of northern alliance place, because only the Kurds were the only armed group in Iraq that had liberated land. And so the plan was for U.S. troops to land there or to sweep down from Turkey. This was before Turkey refused to let the U.S. deploy troops. But there's a whole entire other scenario which is going on now, which is plaguing the Kurds. They're waiting for the U.S. invasion in 2002, and they're being plagued by a group of insurgents. Now, this was a word that would not have been used anywhere else in Iraq except in the north in the Kurdish region, insurgents. These were people linked, militants linked to al-Qaeda. Some of them were foreign fighters, most of them were Kurdish fundamentalists who had set up several camps in the eastern part of northern Iraq, the part that I was in when I was working for ABC News during that 7-month period I spoke of earlier. Now, this group began rigging cars with bombs. Some of them have been trained, ironically, by the CIA in Afghanistan in the early 1980s. They knew explosives very well, and they began rigging automobiles, and the automobiles then were sent into the Kurdish population. And in all, they killed hundreds of Kurds, both in normal combat and with these suicide operations. I had the chance, after Colin Powell's speech identifying this area as a poison lab, the area of one of these camps, to go there under what we thought was a safe conduct pass, and fortunately it turned out to be such. But I was startled with the many months before the war, the fact that the U.S. had satellite photos of this area, and the Kurds were pleading that the U.S. bomb these insurgents and remove this menace from the Kurdish area. And Kurdish leaders told me that the word from Washington was, wait. The weapons of mass destruction is the major topic. We will not have any action in the Kurdish area until the attack begins on Saddam Hussein. So in a way, I see now, with 2020 hindsight looking back, that national security, this group now being linked to those who had committed the heinous acts of September 11th, was trumped by domestic politics, and they held off in attacking this group. This is, and then most of them were able to escape to Iran, and then they came back to Iraq, and they've re-morphed as a group called Ansar al-Sunnah. This was a famous militant called, his nom de guerre was the bomb maker for the tools of the trade he learned in Afghanistan, but he was also more commonly known as Ayub Afghani. These are some of the Kurdish soldiers, the Peshmerga, who were hit. If you look closely, you can see a couple of the bullets in this X-ray. This was a young man who was only 18 years old who was killed by Ansar al-Islam, the militant group I've been speaking about, and his mother has just found him. You see his hand, which is in a state of rigor mortis. Apparently he had tried to stop the bullet, and of course it had come through his hand and killed him, and his mother has just found him. This was a suicide bomb that killed an ABC cameraman. And when my daughter here in Santa Barbara, watching headline news, saw the ticker tape, the news tape come across the bottom part of the screen, it said, ABC journalist killed in Iraq, in northern Iraq, and she thought that I had been the one who had been killed, but it was the Australian broadcasting company, not the American broadcasting company, and all they had used in the initials were ABC. This man I showed you the picture of with the beard, Ayub Afghani, the bomb maker, is said to have rigged this bomb that killed Paul Moran, the Australian journalist. This was another would-be suicide bomber just a couple of days later, and this bomb went off rather close to me, but it was not a bomb from the truck, which you see in the left-hand part of the frame, but actually only a grenade. He had failed to detonate the payload in the truck, and he had gotten out and pulled the pin on the grenade and was shot before he could throw it, and so it's blown off his part of his arm, and he's lying there with Kurdish fighters around him. This was an informer from Ansar al-Islam who was captured and provided information. And this man's name is Qais, and he's in a maximum security prison in this shot. And he is the one who decides he will kill the Prime Minister of the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan, who was actually a friend of mine. His name was Barham Saleh, who later would become Minister of Planning for all of Iraq, Minister of Reconstruction. He's returned now to his role as Prime Minister. And a few weeks after my driver You see my driver to my right here. He's the man, his name is Karzan Mahmoud. He was a driver and a bodyguard for me. And a few weeks after I left in February of 2002, actually I left in March, came back to Santa Barbara in March, this man's house, Barham Salah's house, was attacked by this man, Kais, and 2 other gunmen. And they killed 5 bodyguards, wounded 4, but was unable to kill the prime minister. Kais was able to escape, and he's somewhere in Kurdish captivity now. Now this was my driver after he was hit 23 times, and this was about a year and a half after this incident here, after this other photo that I've shown you here. This is about a year and a half later after the incident, and he's recovering. And because I had a high school friend who was a doctor in Boston, we were able to get him into a hospital in Boston, and he had a number of operations. It was the Brigham and Women's Hospital, a wonderful hospital in Boston, and some $200,000 in surgeries and care, and great help from my friends, the Brabecks, the doctor and his wife, helping him back to normal life. And unlike his friends, these 5 who died in this attack by this Al-Qaeda linked group. So this is the kind of thing which is going on when I'm waiting for the war to come. I arrived over there finally to stay after several trips in earlier 2002. I arrived to stay in September and stayed up until the time that Mission Accomplished was announced in the spring of 2003, and everyone thought that the war was over. This is a memorial service, one in many that were held for these slain bodyguards. Now I turn from this back to the group. This is a very complicated picture, and it's one that has taken me a long time to understand. We are still in Iraq, we are still in the Kurdish region, but this now is the group that we talked about earlier from Turkey. These are the Turkish Kurds, and they are the ones who have sanctuary now in the north of Iraq, and these are the ones that Secretary Rice was talking about when she spoke about the need for Turkey to get behind the program that's coming on Iran. So what will happen to these militants who are in northern Iraq now? These are the ones who were shelled by Iran last week, and these are the ones who are the raison d'etre, the cause of the Turkish troops now lining up on the Iraq border and beginning from 2 sides, Iran and Turkey, to squeeze the Iraqi Kurds again. This is the Kurdistan Workers' Party in Iraq now, and these are some of their graves in northern Iraq. Now we turn finally to the issue of Kirkuk and the Kirkuk refugees. I know that I'm moving rather quickly through this as we get near the end, but I couldn't finish really without talking about the refugees, some 250,000 who were driven out of Kirkuk in the 70s and 80s and 90s by a program called Arabization that took place. And this was a program where Saddam Hussein would offer, the government would offer housing incentives to young Arabs to go to Kirkuk and to take the houses of Kurds in Turkoman. And 250,000 people became refugees and were driven out of their homes to live in places like this. And these were the people, more than any other perhaps, who were waiting and were so powerfully impressed by President Bush's determination to change this government. Because now these are people who lived this way who are streaming back and are ready to reclaim their homes. It was terrible because people in Kirkuk were offered the chance to correct their nationality. That was the word that was used. You can correct your nationality and you may have a chance of staying here as Arabs. But if you maintain that you are a Turkoman or a Kurd, you will be kicked out of the city. And even those who tried to correct their nationality often were driven out of the city as well. This is a young woman, refugee in one of the camps. So now we fast forward to April of 2003, and this is the day after a missile, a U.S. missile, a cruise missile, has hit the security headquarters in Kirkuk, and suddenly the city has been taken without firing a shot, and all those involved in the Ba'ath Party, all those involved in the government structure, suddenly have vanished. I remember this day going in, and we were all wearing our body armor and worried that there was going to be a fight, and really nothing of the sort took place. Of course, we did not, no one else did either, we did not have the ability to see what was coming, and the fact that those who had melted away were still, in fact, there as part of a growing resistance. Here was a thank you, Mr. Bosch. There were other signs that said, thank you, Mr. Blur, and so forth. But it was clear that the Kurds were very happy that this regime change had taken place. Kirkuk is, the Kirkuk region produces, or has the capacity to produce, 900,000 barrels of oil a day. So it's a tremendous oil prize. And the Kurds who have had this autonomous region, Kirkuk lies outside the Kurdish autonomous region, and the Kurds intend to take it back, or they say they will take it back, and put it within their control. Now, Turkey says if that takes place, Turkey will invade under the pretext, some have said, of protecting the Turkoman minority. In fact, the Turkoman have long been a part of Kirkuk, and this is a disputed city, a multi-ethnic city of Arabs, Christians, Turkoman, and Kurds, and it's likely that the civil war, the next war in Iraq, will take place because of the effort to control this city of Kirkuk. Now we're back to my driver, who has almost fully recovered. He has one more operation which he needs, but he's walking and driving, and he seems in such wonderful shape compared to how he was even when he came to the Fiesta Parade here, and he was hobbling around. It was sort of cute. You see the people taking pictures of the floats and the deputies on horseback, and Karzan was there with a point-and-shoot camera, mimicking the photojournalist he had seen in his own country, taking pictures of the Kurdish people. He was now going to document the Santa Barbarans. And so here he is now. He's not only almost fully recovered, but he's here with Proconsul Bremer in the Green Zone in Baghdad, and he's learned the value of a photo opportunity. He's wearing a red tie, very much like Mr. Bremer, and he's made great strides and great changes. Here he is now with President Jalal Talabani in the Green Zone in Baghdad. So we're now back to present time again, and back to the conflict which is taking place between the Sunnis and the Shia. Back here where some of the Kurds have taken the drawbridges and drawn them up around Kurdistan, and they've had a remarkable ability to avoid most of the chaos in the rest of Iraq. In fact, the Kurds have advanced politically because things have been bad in the rest of Iraq. They had 12 years head start in polishing this experiment in democracy and self-determination, and yet now they're at another crossroads. One of the things that Secretary Rice apparently did when she went to Istanbul and had these meetings with the Turkish generals was that she gave apparently gave permission for the Turks to enter into northern Iraq, and for the last 3 years they have not done so, and the Iraqi Kurds have been very afraid they will. But now the Turkish government appears, like all the other countries in the region, to be capitalizing on the Iranian phenomena, the phenomenon that Iran may be next on the map. And so the Kurds now have asked for permission to cross into northern Iraq and to get to try to wipe out the sanctuaries of the Kurdistan Workers' Party.
The Iraqi Kurds, like some of the people in this picture, feel that the larger message is about Kirkuk, this oil-rich city, and that a statement is being made to pressure the Iraqi Kurds. So as we look ahead here to the future, there may indeed be more bloodshed. The Kurds would certainly be the first to want to avoid that, but we're moving more and more now to a crisis situation with the Kurds where some of these older images may have to be repeated. A shaheed, the Arabic word which is accepted throughout the Middle East for martyr. So finally, I would just point out how long this has been going on. When you speak to young nationalists who are Kurds today, they talk about the reclaiming of a homeland. But the fact is the Kurds have really never had their own independent state. And there was some talk of it after the Ottoman Empire fell away following World War I. In fact, the Kurds at a treaty were promised their own homeland in 1921. That was superseded by a treaty the next year in 1922 in Europe, which took away that promise of a homeland. But the Kurds have been looking, at least since that time, to have their own state. And now they're the largest ethnic minority in the world with 25 to 30 million people. This young man, who was a friend of mine, I looked closely at his features. He's a sheikh. He has a couple of hundred men who support him. He's a Kurdish sheikh. And if you look closely at his, I call him a sheikh in a suit. If you look closely at his features, you'll see how much they resemble his father from the 1960s and 1970s, the man who's second from the left, who looks the man who's smiling. The Kurds oftentimes in the past wouldn't smile much in photographs. Perhaps it was seen as a sign of weakness, but this man was a legendary leader. His name was Ali Askari, and he's smiling broadly. But look from the 60s, where he was underground in Kirkuk fighting against the police and the military, and in the 70s until he was killed. Look at his features, and then look at his son, and you know that this man, and now this man, and then his son, and his grandson, and so forth, and so on. It will continue. Oop, there we go the other way. So the economy today is really terrific in northern Iraq. It's a very safe area by comparison to the rest of the country. No American soldier has been killed in northern Iraq, and here's an example of the gold. These women are eyeing what may be part of the dowry arrangement in an arranged marriage. Very rich agricultural area, very rich in livestock, and an area that can practically feed itself, but not entirely. Very friendly area that if there were ever stability in Iraq, this would be one of the largest and brightest tourist spots in all of the Middle East. Very pro-Western, very pro-American. In fact, in the 1970s, during the time of the Kissinger-Nixon funded uprising, the Kurds offered to become the 51st American state. They actually offered to become so. So these are people who consider themselves to have Western or European values. Their adversaries in the area call them Zionist Kurds. They see this as an effort to place another Israel in the Middle East. And the Kurds have never been shy about borrowing patents when it was needed. During my that 1 7-month tour in Iraq, I had many fine meals at Ma Donal. They were lamb, not beef, but they were very good. So the future, a non-country, the non-country. You won't find it on a map, and yet those who are there, as I write in my book, the Kurds, a people in search of their homeland, feel that they already have a homeland, and that now the big problem will be they will have to defend it. So I thank you. We could bring the lights up. I thank you very much for coming. I'd like to